She thought she could spend my money forever. Then the waiter said, declined. At 45, I thought I had mastered the delicate balance of marriage and partnership. My wife, Catherine, and I had been together for 12 years, building what I believed was a solid foundation of trust, respect, and shared dreams. I worked as a project manager at a mid-sized engineering firm, pulling in around $78,000 a year, while Catherine taught third grade at the local elementary school. We lived in a comfortable three-bedroom house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until sunset and neighbors still waved from their front porches. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and I cherished every ordinary moment of it. But that particular Friday evening in late October started like any other, except for the crushing weight of anticipation that had been building in my chest all week. Work had been absolutely brutal, with deadlines breathing down my neck and client meetings that seemed to stretch into infinity. All week long, I had been fantasizing about this Friday night, imagining Catherine and me curled up on our burgundy sectional sofa, sharing a bottle of wine and actually talking to each other without the constant ping of notifications or the exhaustion that seemed to follow us everywhere. Maybe we could finally try that new Italian place downtown that had been getting rave reviews, or simply order takeout and rediscover what it felt like to laugh together without any agenda or schedule pressing down on us. Instead, when I pushed through our front door at 6:30, the living room greeted me with the kind of emptiness that felt deliberately orchestrated. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was pointed. The only thing waiting for me on our kitchen table was a hastily scrawled note on the back of a grocery receipt. Going out with the girls, don't wait up. Dinner's in the fridge if you want it. The handwriting was Catherine's, but something about the casual dismissiveness of it made my chest tighten like a vice was slowly crushing my ribcage. This wasn't the first time she had made plans without so much as a conversation, but lately it had been happening with the regularity of a metronome. Every other week, sometimes more, she would announce these sudden girls' nights with an enthusiasm that seemed to deliberately exclude me from any part of her world. She had been growing increasingly distant over the past few months, less interested in our conversations, always finding reasons to avoid spending quiet evenings together. Her phone had become like a third person in our marriage, constantly buzzing with messages that would make her eyes light up in ways that my presence hadn't in months. I called her cell phone, knowing even as I dialed that she wouldn't answer. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail, and I could practically hear the eye roll in her recorded greeting. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text that felt like a slap across the face. Relax, I'm with friends. I'll be late. Don't wait up. The casualness of it, the complete lack of consideration for my feelings or a relationship, sent a wave of frustration and something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to despair, crashing through me. I wasn't the jealous type, never had been. Throughout our marriage, I had always encouraged Catherine to maintain her friendships, to have her own life and interests outside of our relationship. But being systematically left out, especially without the basic courtesy of a conversation or even a phone call to let me know her plans, made me feel invisible in my own marriage. It was as if I had become nothing more than a paycheck and a warm body to occupy half the bed. Over the past 2 months, I had started noticing a pattern that made my stomach churn every time I thought about it. Every Friday night, Catherine and her crew of 5 girlfriends would end up at Romano's, this upscale Italian restaurant downtown where the appetizers started at $18 and a decent bottle of wine could easily run you $60. They would order like they were celebrating something magnificent, multiple courses, expensive cocktails, desserts that cost more than most people's lunch. And every single time, without fail, it was my credit card that absorbed the financial impact of their celebration. That morning, I had seen the latest statement that Catherine had carelessly left in her purse, and the numbers weren't just concerning, they were infuriating. $347 2 weeks ago. $412 the Friday before that. The week before that, a staggering $568 for what appeared to be a marathon dinner that lasted until nearly midnight. We weren't wealthy people. These weren't amounts we could just absorb without it affecting our monthly budget, our savings goals, our ability to plan for the future we claimed we wanted together. But here's what made it truly soul-crushing. It wasn't really about the money, though the financial strain was real and growing. It was about the principle, the complete lack of respect for our partnership. Catherine seemed to thoroughly enjoy the lifestyle that my hard work and financial responsibility provided, yet she showed absolutely no interest in sharing any part of that life with the person who made it possible. She wanted the freedom to live like a single woman with a married woman's financial security, and that realization stung more than any of the individual charges on her credit card statement. So when she casually mentioned another girl's night coming up the following week, I simply smiled and said, "Sure, have a wonderful time." But inside, I was already calculating exactly what I was going to do. The plan that formed in my mind was elegantly simple, but devastatingly sharp. The moment she sat down to order with her friends, she was going to discover that her precious little dinner party wasn't going to be on me that night. Not this time. I watched her leave that evening in her favorite black dress, the one that hugged her curves in all the right places, her heels clicking confidently against our hardwood floors like she owned the world. She looked beautiful, radiant even, and for a moment I felt a pang of the old love, the old desire to make her happy. But then I remembered the casual cruelty of that note, the months of being treated like an ATM rather than a husband, and my resolve hardened like steel. I waited exactly 10 minutes after her card disappeared around the corner, then opened my banking app with fingers that were surprisingly steady. Finding her card in the system took 30 seconds. Blocking it took another 15. One tap, one confirmation, and suddenly Catherine's financial safety net vanished into thin air. I could already picture her face when the waiter returned to their table with that apologetic smile servers reserve for declined credit cards. She wanted independence from me on her terms? Well, I was about to give her a crystal clear taste of what real independence actually looked like. Romano's was the kind of place that made everyone feel like they were living their best life, with its dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and the kind of atmosphere where laughter echoed off wine glasses and every conversation felt important. When Catherine arrived, her friends greeted her with the usual chorus of hugs and compliments, already deep into their ritual of Instagram-worthy selfies and stories about their week's various dramas and triumphs. This was Catherine's element, surrounded by women who admired her style, her confidence, the carefully curated lifestyle she projected to the world. She slid into the booth with that practiced smile I had seen her perfect in our bathroom mirror countless times, the one that said, "Look at me. I'm living my absolute best life, and you're lucky to witness it." The conversation flowed like expensive wine, filled with gossip about mutual friends, complaints about their various jobs and husbands, and plans for future adventures that would undoubtedly require my financial contribution. When the waiter approached with his professional smile and leather-bound wine list, Catherine handed over the credit card with the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having been denied anything. It was the same card I had canceled exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes earlier. The first sign that something was catastrophically wrong came when the card reader refused to connect, making that distinctive beeping sound that every adult dreads. The waiter's smile faltered slightly as he tried again, then once more, each attempt creating a longer, more awkward silence at the table. Catherine's eyes darted around the table as her friends began to notice the delay, their animated conversation slowly grinding to a halt as they sensed something was off. "Is everything okay?" asked Jessica, one of her closest friends, her voice carrying just enough suspicion to make Catherine's cheeks begin to flush with the first hints of embarrassment. "Oh, it's probably just the machine," Catherine said with forced lightness, but I could imagine the slight tremor in her voice, the way she always got when things didn't go according to her carefully laid plans. She tried inserting the card again, then once more, each failed attempt adding another layer of mortification to what was supposed to be her triumphant evening out. The waiter returned with that professionally sympathetic expression restaurant staff perfect for exactly these situations, shaking his head with genuine regret. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but the card isn't going through. Do you have another form of payment?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just beginning to catch. For the first time that evening, Catherine's confident facade cracked like ice under pressure. Her friends exchanged those quick, loaded glances that women perfect, the kind of silent communication that speaks volumes about social hierarchies and the sudden, uncomfortable realization that their evening's entertainment might be in jeopardy. Some of them began whispering under their breath, Others stared at their phones with sudden fascination, while a few gave Catherine looks that clearly asked, "What exactly is going on here?" Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson that had nothing to do with the restaurant's flattering lighting and everything to do with the crushing weight of public humiliation. She excused herself to the restroom, leaving her friends to sit in that special kind of awkward silence that follows when someone's carefully constructed social image suddenly collapses in real time. Behind the closed door of the ladies' room, Catherine's phone buzzed with multiple missed calls from me, calls that had been deliberately ignored, and several text messages that remained unopened. I could imagine the panic rising in her chest like floodwater as the reality of her situation began to sink in. For the first time in our 12 years together, she was faced with the stark reality that the financial freedom she had taken for granted wasn't actually hers at all. It was ours, and I had just reminded her of that distinction in the most public way possible. The evening stretched on like a slow-motion disaster. Catherine returned to the table with smiles that looked painted on, trying desperately to salvage what remained of her social standing while quietly calculating how she was going to pay for a meal that was already being prepared in the kitchen. Her friends, sensing the shift in dynamics, became increasingly uncomfortable as the evening progressed. The photos Catherine tried to take for her Instagram looked forced and hollow, the laughter sounded strained, and the conversations felt stilted and awkward. I wasn't there to witness every excruciating moment of her humiliation, but through our mutual friend network, I heard every devastating detail: how she had to quietly ask her friends to cover her portion of the bill, how the confident woman who had walked in like she owned the place had to accept charity from women who were already questioning her authenticity, how the evening that was supposed to be her escape from the mundane reality of married life had become a masterclass in consequences and accountability. The next morning, our house felt like the aftermath of an earthquake, with invisible damage that ran deeper than anything you could see on the surface. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, heavier than any argument we had ever had. Catherine moved through our morning routine like she was walking through quicksand, every step calculated, every gesture weighted with the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted between us. When I casually asked about the canceled card over my morning coffee, she gave me one of those tight, controlled smiles that barely concealed the storm beneath the surface. "I don't know what happened," she said with forced casualness. "Maybe it was some kind of bank error or system glitch, but we both knew better than that." The lie hung between us like a curtain that neither of us was quite ready to pull back. That night had cracked something open in our marriage, something that had been building pressure for months. No amount of denial or casual explanations could repair the fundamental breach of trust and respect that had been exposed. It wasn't just about one embarrassing evening at a restaurant. It was about the deeper realization that we had been living parallel lives, sharing a house and a bank account, but not really sharing our hopes, dreams, or even basic consideration for each other. In the days that followed, I watched Catherine's behavior change in subtle but significant ways. She stopped making those casual announcements about girls' nights out. Her laughter, when it came, sounded quieter, more thoughtful, as if she was processing something deeper than just the embarrassment of one difficult evening. She seemed distracted, caught in an internal dialogue about things she had never bothered to examine before. 3 weeks later, she finally asked the question that had been building between us like a wall of water behind a dam. "Why did you cancel my card?" The conversation that followed was unlike any we had ever had. For the first time in months, maybe years, we talked without the television on, without phones buzzing, without any of the usual distractions that allowed us to avoid dealing with the real issues in our relationship. Catherine admitted things I had been waiting years to hear: how much she had taken for granted, not just financially but emotionally, how she had begun to see me as a provider rather than a partner, someone who existed to enable her lifestyle rather than share her life, how embarrassed and ashamed she felt when she realized that her friends had witnessed her complete dependence on someone she had been systematically excluding from her world. "I felt so entitled," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks as she spoke. "I convinced myself that I deserved those nights out, that I was working hard and needed to blow off steam with my friends. But I never stopped to think about what you needed or what you might want from our marriage. I treated you like you were just there to pay the bills and keep the house running while I lived my life." For the first time in our conversation, I saw not the defensive woman who had been making excuses for months, but the person I had fallen in love with years earlier, the woman who was capable of honesty, growth, and the kind of vulnerability that real partnerships require. I told her that trust isn't built on expensive dinners or designer handbags, but on the daily choice to be partners in every sense of the word. That marriage isn't a luxury lifestyle that one person provides while the other person consumes, but a commitment that requires both people to share not just the benefits, but the responsibilities, the struggles, and the boring, everyday moments that actually make up a life together. I needed to know if you valued us, or if you just valued what I could provide, I admitted. When you kept excluding me from your life while using our shared resources to fund that exclusion, it felt like you had already made your choice about which was more important. The conversation lasted until nearly 3 in the morning, covering ground we should have explored years earlier. We talked about expectations that had never been voiced, resentments that had been allowed to fester, and dreams that we had stopped sharing with each other. It was painful, exhausting, and absolutely necessary. That experience became a turning point that neither of us had expected, but both of us desperately needed. We realized that the comfortable patterns we had fallen into were slowly eroding the foundation of everything we had built together. Catherine's girls' nights had become a symptom of a much larger problem. We had stopped being curious about each other, stopped making time for the kind of connection that sustains a marriage through all the ordinary years when passion has to be supplemented by partnership. We decided to rebuild, starting with the smallest, most basic elements of respect and consideration. No more unilateral decisions about evenings out. No more assumptions about whose money was being spent or whose time was more valuable. We instituted a weekly date night. Nothing elaborate or expensive, just time set aside to remember why we chose each other in the first place. I never told Catherine that canceling her card had been a deliberate test rather than an impulsive act of revenge. I wanted her to understand that a relationship isn't a luxury item you display to the world, but a commitment that requires daily tending, constant communication, and the kind of mutual respect that can't be bought with expensive dinners or impressive Instagram posts. The lesson came at a cost: her humiliation, my anger, and months of difficult conversations that forced us both to confront things we had been avoiding. But it was a cost worth paying if it meant saving what was real and valuable between us. Sometimes the only way to wake someone up from a dream built on entitlement and assumptions is to give them a sharp, unmistakable taste of reality. Looking back now, I realize that the real victory wasn't in the moment of Catherine's embarrassment at Romano's, though I won't pretend there wasn't a part of me that found it satisfying. The real victory was in the rebuilding that came after, in the choice we both made to create something stronger and more honest than what we had been settling for. In that moment of crisis, we found not just a way to stay together, but a way to actually become partners again. That's the thing about marriage that nobody tells you when you're young and optimistic and convinced that love conquers all. Love is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You also need respect, communication, shared values, and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when it's hard, even when it requires sacrifice, even when the other person forces you to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. 3 years later, Catherine and I still go out to Romano sometimes, but now we go together. And when the bill comes, we both reach for it at the same time, not because we have to, but because we want to. Because we finally understand that the most important things in a marriage can't be bought, but they can be lost if you stop paying attention to what really matters.